Congressman John Tierney is currently serving his 9th term representing the Massachusetts 6th District. The Congressman currently serves on the Committee on Education and the Workforce, where he serves on the Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Training, and the Subcommittee on Health, Employment, Labor, and Pensions. Previously, from 2007 to 2010, Congressman Tierney served as the chairman of the National Security and Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Congressman was born right here in Salem. He attended Salem Public Schools and graduated from Salem State College. You're a townie. He earned a law degree from Suffolk University, and until he took office in January 1997, was a partner in the law firm of Tierney, Kalis, and Lucas for over 20 years. He and his wife, Patrice, continue to have a home here in Salem, Mass. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman John Tierney.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I know you've deviated a little bit from the format. We get to make a couple of remarks, and I appreciate that. But I want to thank you. I want to thank Go Out Loud. I want to thank all the sponsors on this, because it takes a lot to put 4 people that agree with everything you've done in this area in one room at one time. So it's good. It's really great that the history has marched on where every candidate that's running for office can be in lockstep agreement about equal rights. And I think that indicates it right and validates those of us who have been working and in that position for a long time and doing that, and I'm pleased to see that. But it also reminds me of a statement. I'm going to steal a statement from Barney Frank, who was telling me, he said, you know, when he was a young man, there's 2 things he liked. He liked young boys and he liked politics. The liking the young boys wasn't so popular, liking politics was very popular. Well, flash forward a number of years, he finds out that he still likes men and he likes politics. Liking the men's very, very popular, liking the politics not so much. But, you know, we have a situation right now, and I've heard it mentioned a couple of times by folks up here about this particular Congress not getting things done. And I couldn't agree more. We can't be naive enough to think that you're going to send one person down to Congress and all of a sudden they're going to start writing laws. I don't think any of us are that naive. All of us have taken civics. We know that the House of Representatives is run by a majority, and this current majority is not getting things done. And they're not going to. In reality, anybody tells you that they're going to go down there and become a member of the Republican majority and change those minds and change that agenda, it is not going to happen. And we all know that on that basis. But if you looked at 2007 to 2010, when we had a Democratic majority in the House, according to Norm Ornstein, who's a member of the American Enterprise Institute, one of the more conservative organizations, the most productive Congress since 1965. We passed all sorts of legislation. Don't Ask, Don't Tell went away. We passed ENDER in the House, although it didn't become law because the Senate didn't act on it. But we passed education law, we passed health law, we passed science law. We went on, and we're very, very successful. What we need is a change in majority so that we can get equal rights matters before the House and through the House and on to becoming law. And that's what we're going to do on that, and I'm happy to answer your questions if you have.
Thank you very much. First question with regard to the job market. You may have heard I've asked a couple of candidates. Your plans to ensure equality in the job market, what steps you would take as a congressman to ensure that equality for LGBT people in the marketplace?
Well, I think fundamentally ENDER, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, is the key part to that. I'm glad to be a co-sponsor of that. I'm glad to have worked with, in fact, Barney Frank on making sure that gender identification was allowed to be part of that issue and that people can have all of their rights protected. And we're going to make sure that did get through the House, as I mentioned to you a little while ago, and we need to keep pressing that issue. We're going to put it on for a discharge petition. I heard that process being mentioned earlier, that when you have a bill filed and you have co-sponsors but the majority will not move the bill, you can bring a discharge petition. If you get 218 signatures on it, a majority of Congress, it has to be forced to the floor. Now, we're going to bring that bill out and we're going to sign a discharge petition, but we will not get the signatures needed to move it to the floor because this majority, as I mentioned before, is not going to do that. But we need to get that done. We need to change the majority so that can get done. We also need to make sure that there's enforcement in our employment laws so that people know that when they have their rights violated, we can expect that this government is going to stand with them on the federal level and make sure that it's done. I also think that having written to the President several months ago asking him to take the action that he ultimately took, it was great to see him decide that federal contractors cannot discriminate in their employment practices, and we're going to build on that and make sure we go forward.
2 other topics that we've covered tonight that I will ask you to cover as well revolve around the topics of marriage equality and rights of legally married couples. as well as the issue of homelessness and LGBTQ youth. So let's start with homelessness. What steps would you take to approach the issue of homelessness in the LGBT community, which is running rampant these days?
Yeah, it's about 40% of the youth population, as we understand it to be, and everything like that, and that's totally unacceptable, of course. I co-sponsor a bill, and that is the listed on the sheet that I think was passed out, the Runaway and Homeless Youth Inclusion Act. It would prohibit any discrimination when we're trying to provide shelter or services to people that are in the homeless population, particularly young people in the LGBT community on that. So that's the first step. Move that bill forward, get it passed, and make sure that happens. Also, we need to make sure that we fund the programs that we have for housing for homeless people as it is. If the budget that Paul Ryan wrote and the Republican budget were to pass law, it would emaciate many of those provisions that we have. And we just need to make sure that we have the resources and that we invest them properly so that we have those safeties and protections there for that. So we have a lot of work to do in that regard. I think part of it is budgetary, part of it is making sure that we pass the right laws, and part of it is making sure that we continue to just focus on this going forward.
Moving on to talk of marriage. There are currently, obviously, a number of states that have marriage equality, a number of states that don't. In your role, what would you do to advance the cause of marriage equality in states that don't currently have it? In regard to the rights, the specific rights of married couples, Social Security, maternity, health care, what actions would you say to ensure equality for that as well?
Well, if I had been there, I would have voted against DOMA, but I got there too late for that. But I have voted to repeal DOMA, and I will continually vote to repeal DOMA for all the reasons that were stated earlier on that. I was glad when the Supreme Court took its action on one section that was important, but we have more work to do on that. And I will continue that fight and make sure that we keep bringing up the action to repeal it entirely on that. I also objected loudly when John Boehner and others in the Republican Party used taxpayer money to defend DOMA in court. I thought it was totally inappropriate, and we want to make sure that that type of thing doesn't happen again. Beyond that, we have to pass other laws. We have to be resilient in moving forward on that. We have to make sure that people that are partners, domestic partners, or marriages in those streets that are appropriate or whatever, have their rights for health care in the workplace, that they have the right for retirement, that they have the right to visit a sick individual in the hospital, but they also have the right to take a day off if their spouse or their domestic partner is ill and needs some attention on that. All of those can be done through legislation. We have legislation pending. We co-sponsor a whole host of laws along that line. We ought to make sure that people who have a spouse or a domestic partner who is not here yet in this country has the same rights as a heterosexual spouse on that when some U.S. citizen or a legal resident wants to bring them in. We are right up down the line. We have equal rights for people. We have to take all the legislative actions necessary to make sure that people enjoy them, regardless of their sexual orientation or their gender identification. And I think there's a sheet that we passed out that is available here. Very proud of my Human Rights Campaign support and the fact that I have 100% on their record, and they list out on that all of the bills that I co-sponsored and work on and vote for to make sure that we do all of these things that are necessary.
Thank you very much. Congressman, you have 2 minutes left, so if you would like to go off script and address the crowd, you have the time to do that.
Well, you've been sitting here very patiently for a little time. I won't use all of the 2 minutes. I think you get the point of part of my message here is that we need to make sure that we have the right majority in charge in Congress in order to move forward on these issues. Not just these issues. If you're talking about immigration, if you're talking about education, if you're talking about health care, goes down the line, but particularly issues on equal rights. There is no way that this Republican majority, under its current leadership, is going to move forward on these issues. And so if we really want to be serious about it, we have to change that dynamic, and we can only change that dynamic by making sure that we have a Democratic majority. It may not be true someday in the future, but it is certainly true today.